Hi all, and welcome to our final webinar of the Learn to Fly with Juniper Networks series. Today's title of the webinar is Extending the Secure Edge into the Cloud. I'm Adam Hartley. I head up the technical team for Juniper Networks here at Westcoast. Just a reminder that if you have any questions, ask them as we go along and we'll pick them up at the very end. So let's kick things off. So today we have a very packed agenda, but by the end of the webinar, you will understand what hybrid and multi-cloud is, your customers' pain points and questions to get to that pain. Moving beyond the physical edge and a look and feel of how simple it is to get started with Juniper Networks on AWS and Azure, and an overview of the Westcoast cloud services here, because we have our own cloud services team here at Westcoast. So as this is the final part of our four-part webinar series, I thought I'd recap on what we covered in the previous three webinars. So in webinar one, we covered that every organization has data, and a key play for organizations today is turning that data into insight, so IT teams can take meaningful actions based on that insight. In webinar two, we covered your customers' pain points with questions to get that pain out of them. We also covered Juniper's portfolio and how to position them. In webinar three, we covered Juniper's solution called Software-Defined Secure Networks, where the network automatically contains devices using the entire network as an enforcement device. All of these webinars are on the Westcoast YouTube, so after this webinar, if you'd like to recap and review them, you can find them there, and this webinar should be on there shortly after this webinar closes. So kicking things off, so why Westcoast and Juniper? So the Juniper team here at Westcoast is the largest dedicated team in the UK and I. Westcoast is a large organization with a lot of partners and a large team, but whilst being that we are privately owned and therefore are extremely agile and flexible, both as teams but also with our credit terms as well. We're able to be as dynamic as our partners. The reason to partner with Juniper for security and networking is because you can get great discount rates from the get-go. You can just sign up from a simple web form, and you get automatic access to our reseller discounts to you. We're also in the top 3 vendors for networking and security, so it's a great way to upset the traditional let's just buy and sell Cisco. So enough of plugging, let's get in today's webinar. So most IT teams' idea of heaven is when it comes to networking and security is that any of their network assets, regardless of where it sits, whether that be on-prem, in a cloud, in a private cloud, in a hosted data center, works and integrates with each other regardless of the vendors that they have. At Juniper, we can make this happen as we adhere to open standards so that we can coexist and integrate even with our competitors, which is a great value add and why a lot of the large enterprises that rely on Juniper Network technology choose us. So what are they looking from a public cloud offering? So they're looking to be able to create, manage, and enforce security policy on unowned assets. So when you're going into the public cloud, you don't own the hardware. So that's why people are looking into IT to actually try and enforce policy on there, but it's very difficult to do that. They're looking to protect their data because they can have databases in the cloud, or they'll have VMs, or they'll just have storage in there. That's not on the premise, and that's, again, very hard to do in the cloud. And that's a big IT wish list item for this year that we're seeing. And a lot of your customers have loads of pain points. I'd be here for an hour to try and list them all when it comes to your customers' transitions to the cloud. The challenges that people are having at the moment when it comes to hybrid cloud, and I'll explain what hybrid cloud is a bit later, but I thought I'd address a few pain points early on is securing the communication between headquarters or your branches and the cloud. A lot of organizations just can't deal with it or can't find a vendor that deals with this pain point and just pushes everything to headquarters and doesn't deal with the security implications of that. So from a security device perspective, we're looking at secure communications, so site-to-site VPNs, as well as actually understanding what needs to be protected both on premise, but also within your public clouds or hosted private clouds, regardless of where they sit. They're looking for protection and privacy of that communication between these clouds and headquarters. So if you've got some intellectual property or you've got your main sales database inside of the cloud, you don't want that to be seen by any of your competition or to anyone else because that's information that you'd like to stay within your organization. And that's that has been a big focus for this year. The other thing that's also big for this year and leading into next year is being able to actually add a physical or virtual firewall at the very edge of your network. So a lot of people are trying to save money with costs on hardware, so they move down the virtual route. So from a security perspective, that would be a virtual firewall. So let's actually deep dive and actually understand what the whole essence of this hybrid and multi-cloud thing is. So over this year, we've seen a massive growth in public cloud adoption. According to Gartner, for this year and for last year, we've seen a massive growth up to 26% of the numbers of last year in the public cloud. So that's spread across Microsoft Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. It's the biggest growth we've seen outside of the private data center market. So what actually is this private cloud thing? So as a definition, a private cloud spans across at least one public and one private cloud. This can also include physical on-premise kit, but it's typical that you span your network across two different sites. Hybrid cloud is what the industry is calling the new IT for these big buzzwords within the industry that we don't really know what we're trying to do with it, especially around the Internet of Things. Everyone's talking about it, but we're trying to figure out what the Internet of Things means to people. And then 8 out of 10 enterprises are aiming for a hybrid cloud solution as their infrastructure ideal. And that was a survey done in July this year. So why are people actually going to the cloud? So the whole idea for a hybrid cloud is that you've got your necessary IT on premise, but then you've also able to leverage the scale and choice and availability of a service that is of infinite scale. Just take from a storage perspective, you can just within 3 clicks just be able to increase your database size instead of having to order brand new servers or brand new RAID storage. And keep on having to update that and actually pay the cost for electricity, storage, and having a place to actually put that. The big drivers for this is actually being able to, as we actually said in webinar 1, is actually understanding data. So being able to crunch that data and being able to actually get insight from it, actually being able to actually push that into a money-making part for the enterprise, whether that be via cost savings or being able to actually identify where the business can put investment in going forwards. The other big one is that you pay for what you use. So when you buy a new server and you start putting VMs on it, there's obviously an overhead on there because you're building buffering. Whereas when you're in the public cloud, you pay for that one VM that you need. What they also do it for is because we're working in such a dispersed and spread out organizations, and we typically see this within the campus model, is that you're able to reach and have your resources available across the world with high availability. You don't have to worry about compliance to a certain extent, and you also don't have to worry about the sovereignty of data, especially when it comes to Azure in the UK, because they abide by the same laws that we do, because the data center is in the UK. There's also the fact that everything within the public cloud is backed up, so that you don't have to do this DR plans, so that we can do that. It's also the ability to come to market quicker, so that you're able to design something, spin it up within a couple of minutes, instead of having to go through a whole design and buy cycle that could take months, if not quarters. So moving on from hybrid cloud, what is multi-cloud? So in essence, it's an extension of what I said before, of that it's the use between on-premise / private clouds to a public cloud. But in this case, with a multi-cloud strategy, you're using multiple public and private clouds, or just multiple public clouds. So most organizations don't want to mix their production and development environments within the same cloud, just so that it makes it redundant, and it also means that there's no mix up between, oh, okay, I press go on my development and then it messes up my whole production environment. What we've seen is that it will depend on the region of whether or not you put that production part in AWS or Azure. Usually within America, it's AWS. Within APAC, it's typically Azure. In EMEA, it depends on the organization. It also depends on the use case. So we see quite a lot for Azure for Office 365 and for VMs, but we also see a lot for AWS when it comes to archiving for cold storage, for instance. So here are most of your customers' pain points when it comes to either they're considering moving to the cloud or they're there already. So they've got a mobile workforce and they're connecting into the cloud as well as on-prem, so they have to manage two systems because they'll have a siloed approach between their on-prem stuff and their public cloud stuff. So your IT teams are going to have to manage these two separate systems. There's a lack of consistency of security across the business because, again, they're two siloed parts of your IT infrastructure. So you'll typically see a cloud team of the IT team, and you'll also see an infrastructure team. Well, what we'll also see as a pain point is the secure connections between the private and public clouds, because it's quite a headache when you see vendors that offer these public cloud offerings, but they don't actually talk back to the home kit and being able to give you a unified security posture. They also find it very hard to segment their estates, so being able to say, okay, well, I want these rules to apply to my on-prem stuff, but I also want these rules and some more to apply to my public cloud. What's also very big here is that you'll typically see a web application gateway deployed in clouds, but there's no way of putting a virtual firewall on there. They'll just push that straight back to headquarters. So there's no way to enforce security policies. You'll also see a lot of duplication of work when it comes to IT teams and security teams specifically, because you'll have the same team going in and doing stuff for the infrastructure team and then coming in and then also doing the same thing for the cloud team. So there's a lot of manual intervention there. There's also a massive pain point here, which I've saved to the end, which is that there's no way of ensuring that your data is secure over the public shared infrastructure of both of information that are both at rest and in transit. I'll cover this a bit later on, but just as a heads up that the public cloud is secure from an infrastructure perspective, but as soon as you leave your virtual network or your VPC, depending on if you're using AWS or Azure, your information then, as it leaves those secure environments, are then on shared kit. So your data is then going through the same interfaces as other people's. So what are the questions to ask to get these pain points from your customers? Because obviously all customers aren't going to give you their pain points just by asking. So you've got to ask the right questions. So I usually lead with, so what's your current ideas or plans for moving your resources to the cloud? Most of your customers will have a plan or are in the process of implementing a plan, or already has implemented the plan. A good one where, when it comes to trying to get out how they're spending resource from a people perspective, is asking that, okay, so how are you aligning your staff and time to managing both the office equipment and your cloud estates? That'll be able to get you an idea of what actually they're doing from a workflow perspective. You can then also ask if your network estate is siloed, or are you connecting them back to headquarters? So that gives you an idea of what they're doing from a security perspective. Are they just treating them as two separate entities, or are they just trying to backhaul all the traffic back to headquarters? And if they are, how are they doing it? Because if they're connecting back to headquarters, are they doing it securely? Are they going to be using a VPN? Are they going to be using AWS or Azure's gateways, which gives you that play and push into it, being like, oh, okay, well, you're using Azure's edge gateway, but did you know that, like, before you come out, or before you come to that gateway and before you leave the virtual network, you're actually going over a shared infrastructure, so you may want to protect that, and that gives you a lead in into talking about security. But then there's always reluctance to talk about that stuff. So if they're just like, oh, well, that's because that's the way that we do it, it's just like, okay, but is there a reason why you're not securing it? And if they are securing it, just make sure that you make sure and ask, are they securing each and every virtual network of VPC with each other? Because it may be good that you're putting it right before the gateway, but what about inter VNet VPC traffic? So let's move on a little bit from here. So what I mean by securing beyond the network edge is this whole thing about, so everyone understands security from a networking perspective when it comes from on-premise kit, or from a virtual firewall perspective for your on-premise kit. But when it comes to the cloud, customers are lazy. They don't see it as a priority, and hopefully this will illustrate why. So most organizations, even from an on-prem perspective, have this idea that everything outside of the perimeter is untrusted, but everything inside is trusted. So as soon as you get past the security and you're inside the network, you're free to do whatever you want, and that is a very bad thing. So what that leads to is, if a threat comes in, it means that there's a chance for it to spread laterally across the estate and just spread like wildfire, just like we saw with WannaCry and the Petra viruses earlier on this year. And it also means that you've got limited visibility, so that, oh, okay, well, I saw that this person actually crossed the firewall, for instance, but then I lost track of it because I'm not inspecting this unit of my network each time it tries to access resource. So this is what Juniper's mentality is. It's the trust nothing security mentality. So even if it gets past the edge, everything's untrusted. So if it starts behaving maliciously, it's taken off of the network. And that's what we spoke about on the last part of the webinar. So part 3, the network as a firewall webinar. So if you want to re-watch up and catch up on that, you are more than welcome to, where we go into this a bit more depth. And here's it just ideally illustrated that everything is untrusted. And this also comes from a cloud perspective, is that even from Microsoft's own security intelligence report, is that it says that even Azure itself is compromised by threat actors, that they compromise VMs, taking them over and being able to launch attacks from them. So this whole idea that your data is on a semi-compromised environment, or could be compromised environment, is threatening from that perspective. Just give me a moment, hold on. So what this means is, from a security perspective, not only are we having to secure on-prem, we're having to secure the cloud, not just the environment, but also what we're putting into it as well. So looking into today's enterprise and what that looks like, to just go over what we've spoken to about before. We've got a typical environment that may be doing some advanced stuff, moving into automation a little bit, or moving into software-defined networking. But it's all going to be speaking out into the public internet, or if they've got a bit of money, they'll be using an MPLS connection. They'll have branch networks which don't have any security. They'll just have a BT router on the edge of it, and they'll have a dispersed environment in there with just servers with a few computers or loads of computers, and that will use the resources from headquarters. And then we'll have some public cloud environment here, where if I just take the time to explain it, that everything within this dotted line is the virtual network that is secure, where all your data can reside and be happy. And then it will talk out to, say, if you've got some Active Directory for some light security, and then pushing out via a load balancer potentially, or if they're using ExpressRoute, to then come out via a VPN gateway that way. You can do that there, and then you leave the virtual network to go out via the internet gateway of the cloud provider back onto the public internet, or via an expensive MPLS connection. Same thing goes when it comes to AWS. You can either go straight out of the VPCs straight into the public internet, or you can use what's called direct connect as well. So Juniper's mentality when it comes to hybrid/multi-cloud is that it doesn't matter what cloud that you're using, whether that be a private cloud or multiple different public clouds, they should all be able to talk to each other, have security, and be able to work as one unit together. So this could be one data center in, say, Amsterdam, and this one could be the one in UK South, for instance. It doesn't matter where it is globally, they'll all talk to each other. So this is what we're starting to look for, and starting to build a story of a semi-complex environment when it comes to a multi-cloud environment. So I haven't included headquarters, but I will do in a second. But what we've done here from the previous examples is that in AWS, we've created a secure virtual firewall there in a HA cluster, just so that we can do some load balancing. So what that means is that between each VPC, all your data is secure, and then it goes securely out of the internet via the VPC and the firewall back to branch offices, back to headquarters, and I'll illustrate that in the next slide, I believe. Same thing goes from an Azure perspective as well. You've got all of your key infrastructure down there, speaking with Active Directory, and that all comes into the virtual firewall from Juniper, which is the VSRX, which then secures everything within your virtual network. And then you can either have a load balancer before it, so that you can make sure that all traffic coming into the virtual network is balanced correctly, or you can have it before, which I have just over here, just so that all communication out can be load balanced. And then what the virtual firewall does is, again, creates that secure connection up to the internet gateway and comes out again still secure via an IPsec VPN. If they're using MPLS, you can also do that and encrypt that traffic too. Again, using the virtual firewall, but within Azure, you use ExpressRoute, whereas in AWS, you use Direct Connect. So this is what this looks like from a big campus-style environment. We've got, as I showed before, we've got our two public clouds here. We're connecting them, again, back to virtual SRXs or to a physical small SRX, say 300, 320, 340. And then that creates the secure connection back to your branch offices, both from a IPsec VPN, if that's going over the public Wi-Fi, the public internet, or if you're going to be using expensive MPLS connections. And the same goes for headquarters as well, of using a bigger SRX box to handle all of that traffic. So what that enables us to do is your branch offices can connect directly to the cloud and to headquarters without having to hairpin everything back to headquarters. Because that's what most organizations are paying for at headquarters, is these really big, expensive data lines, whereas most people would prefer them to just connect to the cloud directly instead of having to go all the way back. So this is what this looks like from a higher level, is when we put a virtual firewall in there, when you're trying to access or get information from it and it's legitimate traffic, like say that you've got a web server there, or if you've got some VMs there, you're allowed to connect and get in. But when someone tries to do something malicious, like hack it or do a denial of service attack, or if they're trying to do some credential spoofing, we're able to stop that traffic from going into there and your virtual network is secure. So that's enough of the high-level stuff. We're actually going to do a little bit of a show and tell. So I'm going to show you how simple it is to actually deploy a virtual SRX in the Azure marketplace. So at the moment, it's available as a bring your own license scheme. So you go through this step under your Azure portal, and then you can purchase your licensing through us at Westcoast, and then it's all up and running for you. So this is what you'll see initially when you try to see the next generation firewall image within the Azure marketplace. We can then go down into plans and pricing. Ignore the pricing here; it's quite old, but you'll see it according to your partner level within Azure. But you can change the different regions in there. I've just chosen UK South in this example. I can then continue because I do really want to create this app. I can then see what actually the terms and conditions are, and what actual model do I want to deploy it to. So do I want to deploy it to my default resources, or if it's a bigger environment, they'll have multiple different types. I can then start adding default stuff. So on the box, what actually it's going to be called, what the username is, the password. If I want to create a bespoke resource group, I can do that. And if I've decided to change my mind on the location of this virtual firewall, I can too. I can then choose the size. So on this example, I've gone with the recommended from Juniper, but you can select any one that you can. The only caveat to that is that it must have at least 2 vCPUs and 4 gigabits of RAM as a minimum. So it's all loaded. There's loads of different sliders for you to choose the ones that you would like. As I've done here, I've selected all, just to give you a flavor. I've selected one. I can then select if I want it to be part of a HA cluster, if I've already set that up on a high availability mode. If I'm using my own storage that's within Azure, I can select that too. I can also select my network information. So what is the name going to be for my virtual network, and the subnet and the public IP address if I've already got a list of them, as well as if I want it to auto shut down and if I want it to monitor as well. So and then we get right down to the end of the purchasing part. It'll give you an idea for pricing. Obviously, the image is free because you're just setting up the VM. You do have to buy the licensing currently from yourselves as partners, who will then buy it from us, but it gives you a nice summary of what we've set up. You then click the bottom at the bottom, you click the tick box at the bottom and then click purchase, and then it will spin it up for you in about 4 minutes. And as I said before, it doesn't matter if you decide to do this within UK South, in EMEA, if you start to do it in America or APAC. They're all going to work to each. They're all going to work with each other and talk to each other securely. So when it's up and running, this is what it looks like. There's basically 3 different areas. You've got your management, you've got your untrust, and your trust. So the management subnet is your management bit, which is where you connect to manage the device. You've then got your untrust, which is the public access subnet, and then you've got your trusted, which will be into there. You can add multiple private subnets, which will apply to each virtual network if you'd like, if you've got them all tied together, or you could apply to best practice, which is that you have a VSRX per virtual network. This is a little bit of a breakdown to look at what that looks like and the interfaces names of them. You can also put a network addressing table VM if you want to be extra careful in there when it comes to assigning network addresses. So we can also do that in a proxy format. So from a VM perspective, Juniper uses a Linux as a guest OS to sit on the hypervisors. There's loads of different forms in here. So both on-prem and in the cloud, we support loads of different types. We also have a separate control plane and a data plane. So that just means if there is a denial of service attack, you can still access the device and issue commands to it so that you have control of the device even under attack. So let's talk about Westcoast Cloud Services, because it's all great about us singing and dancing about the Juniper part, but you also need some help when it comes to the Azure part, because that's one of the best bits about Westcoast, is that if you need help, we've got it in here, we are the best on the market. So Westcoast Cloud Services team it's shaped around your investment in Azure, basically. We have a program that basically takes you and onboards you and upskills you enough so that you can consistently grow your business. We at Westcoast, we understand the Microsoft and also the Azure part, so it makes it a lot simpler for you to license all of the different products through the cloud solution provider program scheme that we run here. From day one, as soon as you sign up and sign the T's and C's and we come and see you, we make available the whole range of cloud services as well as the other services that are within our portfolio. So our cloud team doesn't just deal with Azure and the Microsoft licensing, they also have technology partners and complementary services that will enable you to take your cloud adoption to the next level for your customers. So as a Westcoast CSP partner, we at Westcoast aim to maximize your cloud business. And how do we do this? So we always aim to increase your Microsoft seat count by doing loads of things, which I'll go into the next few slides. But we also being able to expand your recurring revenues and margin opportunities because you're buying through the CSP options. But then we're also going to be able to provide you with unrivaled support and able to help you deploy, deliver, and manage the cloud-based solutions. It's what our cloud partners actually rate us for the best, is our support, both from a ticketing perspective, but also from an account management perspective, is that we are always there to help you through your cloud journey. So the way that we enable our partners is through a 6-point scheme. Activate, automate, educate, embrace, share, and nurture. And this enables you to get the very best out of your investment with us at Westcoast and the cloud services team. This isn't the full breakdown because it's a very long list, but this gives you an idea of how much and how invested Westcoast is into the Azure and cloud services. You'll see a star rating system there, and that indicates your partner level. So from day one, you'll have your cloud account created. You'll have a marketplace walkthrough. You'll then be able to access all of our online webinars, have access to our sales and technical training events days. You'll have access to all of the cloud vendors and the partners, and help in achieving all Microsoft Cloud competencies. And then as you build your business and start gaining more revenue and getting more certs, we invest more and more and more into you. As I said, this is only 4 of 6, and we do a lot more that's not even on this sheet. So we keep on investing in our partners just so that you can get the revenue up there. So if you have any needs for our cloud services team, you can reach out to them at cloud@westcoast.co.uk, or just ring the general West Coast number, and you can reach out to them there. So coming back to the reason why we're here, Westcoast and Juniper. So why us? So we're the most experienced team in the UK and I distribution channel. Between us, we have 20 years of Juniper experience, and combined networking and security experience of 25 years. As I said before, we're a privately owned £1.9 billion company, but we're privately owned, so that means that we're agile to your needs. A really good example of that is my counterpart from a sales perspective is David Siddle, who was able to set up a partner, be able to get them the credit limit that they wanted, to then be able to get them to pass the risk assessment, to then loading the order and getting it shipped out within the same day. He did that within 2 hours. So that's how flexible we are. We did something in 2 hours that our competitors would most probably take weeks for. And as I said before, we are a very dynamic team and a very dynamic organization. So us and our stocking profile is as dynamic as you need us to be. If you give us enough notice, we'll definitely have it in stock for you from a Juniper perspective. So from a pure West Coast perspective, we're always winning awards. It's not something to bat an eyelid at. We're always here, there, and everywhere, especially our marketing team and our sales team, especially when it comes to Microsoft and it comes to our mobile solutions and, as I said, our marketing team. We're always up for awards, and our managing director, Alex Tatum, is always up and out there about shouting about the West Coast piece. So here's the team. So here's Ed and Michael. So they're our external BDMs. They are the people who head up our big relationships with our partners. We will be sending out this in a PDF, so don't worry about trying to jot down the numbers. I'm Adam Hartley. I head up the technical team for Juniper Networks at West Coast, as I said before. And then, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we've got David Siddle, who's our net new partner BDM here at West Coast. So he deals with all of our new partners and getting them up and running, as well as maintaining that relationship going forwards. So this is where we move to the questions and answers bit. If there's any questions, we'll take them. But just to note that you can get hold of us at juniper@westcoast.co.uk. We'll be sending out the PDF in due time, as well as putting this on our YouTube channel, where the rest of our 4-part series is on there. So that's on the West Coast YouTube channel. Another note is that later on today, the prize draw will be drawn, and our marketing team will be in touch with those winners and announce them going forwards. I hope that you've enjoyed the series, because I know that I have, and David Siddle passed on his words of thanks to you who have joined us throughout the entirety of the series. And well, thank you very much for your time. I know that we finished a bit early today, so that enables you to get back to your jobs. Thanks very much for tuning in.